He was just the maintenance worker, silent as a shadow. A single dad with calloused hands and a worn toolbox. No one at the elite SEAL training facility ever looked twice at him. Not the cocky recruits who threw their gear on freshly cleaned floors. Not the instructors who barked orders from dawn to dusk. He was invisible, forgettable, just another working man, trying to make ends meet while raising his daughter alone. But when the new female commander arrived and caught a fleeting glimpse of the faded tattoo on his forearm during a routine equipment check, everything shattered. That mark, barely visible beneath years of wear and regret, was a symbol she'd seen only once before in a classified intelligence briefing. A symbol that belonged to operators who didn't exist on paper. Men who were ghosts. What unfolded next wasn't just a revelation. It was a reckoning of sacrifice, buried honor, and the kind of quiet strength that refuses to be extinguished. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The floor of the SEAL training facility at Blackwater Naval Complex gleamed under the harsh overhead lights. Each tile scrubbed clean, each corner swept with the kind of attention most people reserve for things that mattered. Beneath the pull-up bars, and around the edges of the sparring mats, a man moved with quiet efficiency, pushing a maintenance cart loaded with cleaning supplies, tools, and replacement parts. Levi Armstrong didn't belong to this world anymore. Not really. Not the world of midnight operations, encrypted communications, or missions that never made it into official reports. Those days were buried deep, locked away in a part of his mind he'd learned to keep sealed. Now he wore a different uniform. Faded work pants, a navy blue maintenance shirt with his name stitched above the pocket, and steel-toed boots that had seen better years. He looked like any other facility worker, invisible to the young warriors who trained here. Disposable even, but there was something in the way he carried himself, a stillness that didn't quite fit. His posture was too straight for someone who spent his days fixing broken equipment and mopping up after others. His eyes tracked movement with an alertness that no maintenance training manual could teach. And every step, every turn of his wrench, every adjustment he made to a weight machine had a precision to it. Muscle memory, the kind that came from years of doing very different work. "Yo, old man," a voice called out from across the gym. Water fountains busted again. Levi didn't react to the tone. He simply grabbed his toolbox and walked toward the fountain near the free weights. Cole Palmer, 23 years old and fresh, out of basic underwater demolition training, stood nearby, with his arms crossed and a smirk on his face. A few of his buddies clustered around him, still catching their breath from a brutal circuit session. "Probably needs a whole new system," Cole said loud enough for everyone to hear. "Things older than Grandpa here." Levi knelt down, opened his toolbox, and began inspecting the fountain's valve system. No words, no acknowledgement of the jab, just steady hands and focused eyes. He located the problem within 30 seconds, a loose compression fitting, and had it fixed in less than 2 minutes. He stood, tested the water flow, wiped his hands on a rag, and moved on. Cole snorted. "Man doesn't even talk. Probably forgot how." Behind them, a 315-pound deadlift crashed onto the platform. Music thumped from speakers mounted in the corners. Grunts, laughter, the metallic clang of iron on iron filled the space like a heartbeat. And through it all, Levi Armstrong moved like a current beneath the surface, present but unseen, necessary but unnoticed. What none of them knew, what they couldn't possibly understand, was that Levi's silence wasn't weakness. It was discipline. The kind forged in places where a single sound could mean the difference between life and death. Where patience wasn't a virtue but a survival skill. He wasn't just fixing equipment. He was observing, cataloging. His eyes had already mapped every exit, every blind spot, every reflective surface in the gym. Old habits, the kind that 14 years as a Tier 1 operator had burned into his DNA. Levi had once been part of something most people didn't even know existed. A unit with no official designation, no public record, no medals ceremony. They were called Phantom Protocol. Operators who worked in the spaces between wars, handling threats that couldn't be acknowledged, and eliminating problems that couldn't be solved through conventional channels. His call sign had been Wraith, but that was another lifetime. Now he was just Levi Armstrong, maintenance worker, single father to an 8-year-old daughter named Sophie. His world had shrunk to school drop-offs, parent-teacher conferences, fixing leaky faucets, and this job at a facility where he'd once briefed commanders on operations that would never see daylight. Why does he even work here? One of the younger recruits whispered as Levi walked past, carrying a replacement cable for the lat pull-down machine. Guy's like a robot or something. Levi heard it. He heard everything. His hearing had been trained to pick up whispers in sandstorms, footsteps on gravel from 50 yards away, the distinctive click of a safety being released. But he didn't react. He simply continued to the machine, removed the frayed cable, and began threading the new one through the pulley system. The gym was massive, easily 10,000 square feet of open training space. One wall was lined with framed photographs of former SEAL teams, faces blurred in some, sharp in others. Unit citations hung beside them, some faded with age. Levi paused near that wall, his eyes drifting to one photograph in particular. It was grainy, taken in low light. A group of operators standing in front of a helicopter, faces obscured by night vision goggles and tactical gear. No names, no dates, no context. But Levi knew every man in that photo. He'd served with them, bled with them, buried 3 of them. He was in the photo too, second from the right, face half hidden in shadow. He turned away before the memories could catch up. The afternoon stretched into evening. Recruits cycled through in waves. Some worked with quiet determination. Others, like Cole Palmer, performed every rep like it was a personal audition. Levi moved between them all, tightening bolts, replacing worn grips, cleaning up spilled water and forgotten towels. At one point, he found himself near the heavy bags. A young recruit was practicing strikes, but his form was sloppy. Feet too close together, shoulders tense, punches coming from his arms instead of his core. Levi watched for a moment, then quietly adjusted in the angle of the bag while the recruit took a water break. When the recruit returned and threw his next combination, the difference was immediate. The bag responded better, the impact more solid. The recruit looked confused for a second, then continued, his confidence growing with each strike. Levi moved on. No acknowledgement needed. No credit taken. That was the thing about real strength, real skill. It didn't need an audience. As the sun began to set, casting long orange light through the high windows, Levi packed up his cart. His shift was ending. Soon he'd drive his aging Ford truck across town to pick up Sophie from after-school care, help her with homework, make dinner, and read her a bedtime story. That routine, simple and predictable, was the only thing that mattered now. But as he pushed his cart toward the storage room, he felt it. That familiar tingle at the base of his skull, the awareness that someone was watching him, not with casual curiosity, but with focus. He didn't turn around, didn't change his pace, but his senses sharpened, his breathing steadied, and somewhere deep inside, a part of him that had been dormant for years flickered awake. Someone had noticed, and in Levi Armstrong's experience, being noticed was rarely a good thing. The morning air at Blackwater Naval Complex carried the sharp scent of salt and diesel fuel. Waves crashed against the nearby coastline. A constant rhythm that had become white noise to everyone who worked there. But for Commander Amber Maxwell, standing at attention in the facility director's office, every sound was still new, still distinct. She'd arrived at 0600 hours, exactly as instructed. Her uniform was pressed to perfection, boots polished, insignia clean. But it wasn't the decorations that defined her. It was the way she held herself, the calm intensity in her eyes, the sense that she'd earned every inch of the authority she now carried. At 34, Amber Maxwell was the youngest female commander Blackwater had ever seen. Some whispered it was a diversity hire. Others said she'd only made it this far because of political pressure. They didn't know about the 3 tours she'd served in hostile territories. They didn't know about the bullet wound in her left shoulder or the shrapnel scars hidden beneath her uniform. They didn't know that she'd turned down 2 promotions because she wanted field experience, not desk duties. And they certainly didn't know about her brother. Lieutenant Jackson Maxwell had been a SEAL, one of the best, according to everyone who'd served with him. He'd died 6 years ago, during a classified operation that his family was never fully briefed on. The official report said equipment failure. The unofficial whispers said something else entirely. Something about a mission that went sideways, a unit that didn't exist, and operators who vanished from all records. Amber had spent years trying to understand what really happened to Jackson. Every door she'd knocked on had been closed. Every file she'd requested had been redacted. Every question had been met with silence. But she hadn't stopped searching. This assignment to Blackwater wasn't random. She'd requested it specifically. Because buried in her brother's personal effects, she'd found a single photograph. Him standing in this very facility, arm around another operator, both of them smiling. On the back, in Jackson's handwriting, "The ones who stay in the shadows are the ones who keep the light on." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. She didn't know what it meant, but she knew it mattered. Commander Maxwell, the facility director, said, pulling her from her thoughts, "Your primary responsibility is operational readiness and recruit evaluation. We run a tight ship here. These men are preparing for the worst environments on the planet. Your job is to make sure they're ready." "Understood." "Sir." "Good. Start with a facility walkthrough. Get familiar with the layout, the personnel, the rhythm. Any questions?" "No, sir." 20 minutes later, Amber was walking through the main training complex. She moved with purpose, clipboard in hand, observing everything. The obstacle course outside where recruits were running through mud and barbed wire. The armory where weapons were cleaned and maintained. The mess hall where conversations were loud and competitive. And then she entered the gym. The space was exactly what she expected. Loud, intense, saturated with the smell of sweat and determination. Recruits were scattered across the floor, some lifting, some grappling, some running drills. Instructors barked corrections and encouragement in equal measure, but it was the quiet figure near the far wall that caught her attention. A maintenance worker, mid-40s maybe, moving between machines with a toolbox and a calm that seemed out of place in all the chaos. He wasn't rushing, wasn't distracted, just methodical, efficient, almost meditative in his movements. Amber watched as he knelt beside a cable machine, inspecting something. His hands moved with precision, adjusting, tightening, testing. There was a grace to it, a confidence that felt practiced in a way that went beyond simple repair work. She made a mental note and continued her walkthrough. But over the next 2 hours, as she moved through different areas of the facility, she kept seeing him. Fixing a door hinge in the locker room, replacing a light fixture in the hallway, adjusting the tension on a heavy bag. Always quiet, always alone, always moving like he belonged in the space but not to it. By the afternoon, Amber found herself back in the gym. This time she positioned herself near the observation window, watching the floor from an elevated position. Recruits cycled through their training rotations. Instructors evaluated form and endurance. And there he was again, the maintenance worker. She watched as one of the recruits, a cocky kid with too much swagger, deliberately knocked over a water bottle near where the man was working. The liquid spilled across the freshly cleaned floor. The maintenance worker didn't react. He simply walked to his cart, retrieved a mop, and cleaned it up. No frustration, no confrontation, just quiet competence. But it was the way he moved that made Amber's instincts flare. His posture was too controlled, his awareness too sharp. When he bent down to mop, his eyes scanned the room, tracking movement, assessing distance and position. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but Amber had spent enough time in operational environments to recognize it. That wasn't the behavior of a maintenance worker. That was the behavior of someone trained to survive. She pulled out her phone and opened the facility personnel database. It took her a few minutes to navigate to the civilian contractor list, but eventually she found him. Name: Levi Armstrong. Position: facility maintenance technician. Employment start date: 4 years ago. Prior employment: various contract positions. Military service: none listed. Amber frowned. None listed didn't mean no service. It just meant nothing on record. She made another note and continued watching. Later that evening, after most of the recruits had cleared out, Amber returned to the gym. It was quieter now, just a few stragglers finishing late workouts. Levi Armstrong was still there, wiping down equipment, checking inventory, making sure everything was in order for the next day. Amber approached slowly, her footsteps deliberately audible so as not to startle him. "Excuse me," she said. He turned, his expression neutral, professional. "Yes, ma'am. Something need fixing." His voice was calm, measured. No deference, no nervousness, just steady. "No," Amber said. "I'm Commander Maxwell. New assignment here. Just wanted to introduce myself to key personnel. Levi Armstrong," he said, extending a hand. His grip was firm, controlled. Not trying to prove anything, but not weak either. She noticed the calluses, the small scars across his knuckles, the faint tan line on his ring finger, where a wedding band used to be. "How long have you worked here, Mr. Armstrong?" "About 4 years. You prior military?" A pause. Just a fraction of a second, but enough for Amber to notice. "Long time ago," he said. "Different life." She nodded. "Well, facility looks good. You do solid work." "Thank you, ma'am." He turned back to his cart, signaling the conversation was over. But as Amber walked away, she couldn't shake the feeling that there was far more to Levi Armstrong than a maintenance job and a toolbox. And somewhere in the back of her mind, a connection was forming, a sense that the shadows her brother had spoken about might be closer than she'd ever imagined. 3 days passed before Amber saw the tattoo. It happened during a routine equipment inspection. She'd been going through the facility's safety protocols, checking that all machinery met current standards. Levi Armstrong had been assigned to accompany her, since he was the one who maintained most of the equipment. They were in the weight room, examining a bench press station that had been flagged for potential frame wear. Levi knelt down to inspect the welds, running his fingers along the joints with practiced ease. "This one's fine," he said. "The report probably came from someone who doesn't know the difference between stress marks and actual fractures." "The frame's solid." Amber made a note on her clipboard. "You have engineering background." "Picked up a few things over the years." As he reached up to test the bar's rotation, his sleeve shifted. Just for a moment. Just enough. Amber's pen froze mid-stroke. There, on his forearm, partially visible beneath the fabric, was a tattoo. Black ink, faded with age and sun exposure. She could only see a portion of it, but what she saw made her breath catch. A skull with a dagger, through it, wrapped in barbed wire. And beneath it, barely visible, 3 letters. PP. Levi noticed her staring. He quickly adjusted his sleeve, pulling it back down over the mark. "Old mistake," he said casually. "Got it when I was young and stupid." But his tone had changed. Just slightly. The ease was still there, but beneath it was something else. Caution. Amber forced herself to refocus. "Right. We all have those." They finished the inspection in relative silence. Levi answered her questions professionally, but the warmth from earlier conversations had cooled. He knew she'd seen something, and he knew she'd recognized it. That night, alone in her quarters, Amber sat at her desk, with her laptop open. The room was sparse, furnished with only the essentials: a bed, a desk, a small bookshelf. On the shelf, sat a framed photo of her and Jackson, taken years ago during a family vacation. His smile was wide, genuine, the kind that made everyone around him feel safe. She missed him every single day. Amber turned back to her laptop and opened a secure folder she'd been building for years. Inside were scanned documents, photographs, notes from conversations with Jackson's former teammates. Anything she could gather about his final mission. Most of it was fragments. Pieces of a puzzle with half the parts missing. But there was one document she kept coming back to. A partially redacted intelligence brief she'd obtained through a contact who owed her a favor. It detailed a black operations unit that had been active between 2008 and 2015. The unit had no official name in the document, just a designation, Phantom Protocol. Operators in this unit were recruited from various special forces branches. Their missions were never logged in official records. They worked in complete darkness, handling threats that couldn't be publicly acknowledged. And when their service ended, they were given a choice. Accept a full identity, reset, and a stipend for silence, or face charges for silence for operations that officially never happened. Most chose silence. The document included a single photograph, taken from a distance, heavily shadowed. A group of operators standing near a helicopter. Their faces were obscured, but one detail was visible on several of them: tattoos. Specifically, a skull with a dagger through it, wrapped in barbed wire. The symbol of Phantom Protocol. The letters P stood for exactly that. Amber's hands trembled slightly as she zoomed in on the image. She'd looked at this photo 100 times before, always searching for some sign of Jackson. But now, she was looking for something else. Someone else. The figure second from the right had the same build as Levi Armstrong. Same height, same posture. The quality was too poor to confirm identity, but the possibility was there. She opened another file. This one contained a list of names, all operators believed to have been part of Phantom Protocol. The list had been compiled from whispers, rumors, fragmented records. Most of the names were redacted or marked as Kaya. But one name stood out. Armstrong, L. Status. Presumed Kaya. Operation Sandstorm. 2014. Amber's heart pounded. She clicked on the entry, but there was almost nothing. Just a date, a location that had been blacked out, and a single line of text. Operator Armstrong remained behind to ensure team extraction. No contact established post-mission. Body not recovered. She sat back in her chair, mind racing. Levi Armstrong wasn't just a maintenance worker. He was a ghost, a man who'd officially died 11 years ago, but was somehow here, alive, fixing cable machines and mopping floors. The question was, why? The next morning, Amber requested Levi's full employment file from Human Resources. The records clerk, an older woman named Patricia who'd worked at Blackwater for 20 years, handed over the folder without question. Amber took it back to her office and spread the contents across her desk. Employment application. Standard background check. References from previous contract jobs, all of which checked out. Tax records. Emergency contact information. A single name. Sophie Armstrong, daughter, age 8. But there was something missing. No DD 214 form, no discharge papers, no military service record at all. For someone who moved like Levi Armstrong, who carried himself with that kind of control and awareness, the absence of military documentation wasn't an oversight. It was intentional. Amber pulled up the facility's security footage archives. She scrolled through days of recordings, watching Levi's routines. The way he entered the building each morning at exactly 0545 hours. The way he swept every room, his eyes always tracking, always assessing. The way he positioned himself during busy periods, always with his back to a wall, always with clear sightlines to exits. These weren't habits, they were training. She froze the footage on one particular frame. Levi was reaching up to adjust a pull-up bar, and his sleeve had ridden up again. The tattoo was clearly visible. Amber screenshot the image, enhanced it, and compared it to the intelligence brief photo. It was a match. She closed her laptop and stared at the framed photo of Jackson on her desk. Her brother had died on a mission with Phantom Protocol, and now one of his unit members was here, working in the same facility where Jackson had once trained. This wasn't coincidence. Amber stood and walked to the window, looking out over the training grounds. Recruits were running drills in the early morning light, their shouts and commands drifting through the glass. Somewhere out there was a man who held answers. Answers about what really happened to Jackson. About why Phantom Protocol was disbanded. About what truths had been buried beneath layers of classification and silence. And Amber Maxwell wasn't going to let him disappear again. Not this time. Amber Maxwell had learned early in her career that the truth rarely volunteered itself. It had to be hunted, cornered, and extracted from the shadows where it preferred to hide. And right now, the truth about Levi Armstrong was buried deeper than most. She spent the next 2 days digging. Her first call was to an old friend at Naval Intelligence, a man named Harris who'd served with her during her second deployment. They'd kept in touch over the years, trading favors when they could, respecting boundaries when they couldn't. "I need information on a unit," Amber said, keeping her voice low despite being alone in her office. "Phantom Protocol, operated between 2008 and 2015. There was a long pause on the other end. Then Harris's voice came back, careful and measured. "That's not a name I've heard in a long time. What's your interest?" "Personal," Amber said. "My brother." Another pause. "Jackson Maxwell?" "Yes." Harris exhaled slowly. "Amber, that whole operation was sealed. Not just classified, sealed. The kind of seal that comes with career-ending consequences for anyone who tries to break it." "I'm not asking you to break anything," Amber said. "I just need context, background, things that wouldn't compromise active operations." "There are no active operations," Harris said quietly. "Phantom Protocol was disbanded in 2015. The unit was officially dissolved, and every operator was either reassigned, retired, or marked as KIA. Why was it disbanded? That's above my clearance," Harris said. "But the rumors, and I'm telling you this as a friend, not as an intelligence officer, the rumors say there was a mission that went wrong, bad intel, maybe a setup. The unit lost half its operators in a single night. After that, Command decided the program was too risky, too much liability." Amber's throat tightened. "Jackson died in that mission, didn't he?" "I can't confirm that," Harris said. "But if he was Phantom Protocol, and if he died in 2014, then yes, that timeline matches." She closed her eyes, steadying herself. "What about the survivors? The ones who made it out?" "Most of them took the deal," Harris said. "Clean break. New identity. Stipend for life. In exchange for silence. A few refused and were dishonorably discharged on fabricated charges. Command needed deniability, and they got it. Do you have names?" "No. And even if I did, I couldn't share them." "Amber, you're asking me to hand you a list of ghosts. These men don't exist anymore, not on paper. If you found one, the best thing you can do is leave him alone." "What if I can't?" she asked. Harris was quiet for a long moment. "Then be careful, because if he stayed hidden this long, there's a reason, and digging into that reason might put both of you in danger." The call ended, and Amber sat in silence, staring at her desk. She understood the warning, understood the risks, but she'd come too far to turn back now. That evening, she made another call. This one to her father, Admiral Theodore Maxwell, retired, answered on the third ring. His voice was gruff, weathered by decades of service and the cigar habit he'd never fully quit. "Amber, this is a surprise." "Hi, Dad. Do you have a few minutes?" "For you, always." She hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "I need to ask you about Jackson." A heavy sigh. "Sweetheart, we've been over this. I've told you everything I know." "I don't think you have," Amber said gently. Not because you're hiding anything, but because I don't think you were told everything either. Silence. Dad, was Jackson part of a unit called Phantom Protocol? The silence stretched longer. When her father finally spoke, his voice had changed. Harder, more guarded. Where did you hear that name? Research. And I think I found someone who served with him. Amber, listen to me very carefully, her father said. That unit doesn't exist, it never did, and if you found someone claiming to be part of it, you need to walk away. Right now. Why? Because those men were involved in operations that could start wars if they ever became public. Because the people who authorized those missions are still in power, and they will protect their secrets at any cost. And because if Jackson was part of that world, then he knew the risks and accepted them. So you're telling me to just forget about him? Amber's voice cracked slightly. To pretend I don't have questions. I'm telling you to honor his sacrifice by staying safe, her father said. Jackson wouldn't want you putting yourself in danger for answers that won't bring him back. Amber wiped her eyes. What if the answers could help someone else? Someone who's still alive? Her father was quiet for a long time. When he spoke again, his voice was softer. Then you do what you think is right. But you do it smart, and you remember that the men who survive that life, they survive by staying invisible. If you force them into the light, you might destroy the only peace they've managed to find. After the call ended, Amber pulled out a wooden box she kept in her footlocker. Inside were Jackson's personal effects, the few items the Navy had returned to her family after his death. A watch, dog tags, a wallet with a faded photo of their family, and at the bottom, wrapped in tissue paper, a small notebook. She'd looked through it before, but only briefly. Most of the pages were mundane. Training notes, workout routines, book recommendations. But near the back, written in Jackson's distinctive handwriting, was a list of names. Most were crossed out, but 3 remained. One of them was Armstrong, Wraith. The one who stayed Amber's hand trembled as she traced the words. Jackson had known Levi, had served with him. And whatever had happened on that final mission, Levi had been there. The pieces were falling into place, but the picture they formed was still incomplete. The next morning, Amber positioned herself in the gym during the early training session. She watched Levi move through his routine, this time with different eyes. She noticed how he never stood with his back to an open space. How his hands were always free, never holding tools in a way that would slow his reaction time. How he tracked every person who entered or exited, assessing threat levels without conscious thought. And she noticed something else. The way some of the older instructors treated him, not with disrespect, but with a subtle deference. A nod here, a brief acknowledgement there. They knew, maybe not his full story, but they sensed something. Levi finished adjusting a rowing machine and turned to find Amber standing a few feet away. "Commander," he said evenly. "Something I can help you with?" "Rosten-in." She met his eyes. "I think we need to talk, privately." His expression didn't change, but she saw the calculation behind his eyes. The decision being made in real time. Finally, he nodded. "My shift ends at 1,600 hours. There's a maintenance shed near the south perimeter. It's quiet. I'll be there," Amber said. As she walked away, she felt the weight of what was coming. This conversation would change everything. For both of them. And there was no turning back. The maintenance shed sat at the edge of the facility, tucked between a storage building and the perimeter fence. It was a small structure, barely larger than a garden shed, filled with spare parts, tools, and supplies. The kind of place no one visited unless they needed something specific. Amber arrived 5 minutes early. The sun was beginning its descent, casting long shadows across the compound. She could hear the distant sounds of training drills, the rhythmic cadence of running feet, the sharp commands of instructors pushing recruits to their limits. But here, in this forgotten corner, everything was quiet. The shed door opened. and Levi stepped inside. He closed it behind him, not aggressively, just with the careful precision of someone who understood the value of privacy. He leaned against the workbench, arms crossed, expression neutral. "You've been asking questions," he said. "Not an accusation, just a statement." "I have," Amber admitted, "because I saw your tattoo, and I know what it means." Levi was quiet for a moment, then pulled up his sleeve, fully revealing the mark. The skull, the dagger, the barbed wire, and those two letters. P. Phantom Protocol. Amber said softly. He nodded. "A lifetime ago. You were declared Kaya in 2014. Operation Sandstorm." "I was," Levi said. "Officially, I died in the Hindu Kush Mountains during an exfiltration gone wrong. Unofficially, I made a choice." "What kind of choice?" Levi pushed off the workbench and moved to the small window, looking out at the training grounds. "The kind where you decide what matters more, the mission or the men." Amber waited, giving him space to tell it his way. "We were sent to extract a high-value target," Levi continued. "Someone who had intel on a terrorist network planning attacks on U.S. soil. The mission was supposed to be clean. In and out. No contact. But the intel was wrong. Or maybe it was a setup. We never found out which." His jaw tightened. "We walked into an ambush, lost 3 men in the first 60 seconds. The rest of us were pinned down in a compound with no air support and no extraction. Command gave us an order, destroy all evidence and scatter. Every man for himself. And you didn't follow that order." Amber said quietly. Levi shook his head. "There were wounded. 2 operators who couldn't move on their own. Command said leave them, that extraction wasn't possible. I said that wasn't acceptable." He turned to face her. "Your brother was one of them." Amber's breath caught. She'd suspected, but hearing it confirmed hit differently. "Jackson took shrapnel to the chest," Levi said. "Collapsed lung, internal bleeding. He needed immediate medical attention, and we were 12 miles from the nearest safe zone. So I stayed, carried him, and the other wounded operator, through hostile territory, while the rest of the team followed the scatter order." "You saved him," Amber whispered. "I tried," Levi said, his voice heavy. "Got them both to the extraction point. Called in a favor from a private contractor I knew. Someone who owed me. Got a bird in the air, unsanctioned, unlogged. We loaded the wounded, and I sent them out. But you didn't go with them." "I couldn't," Levi said. "The compound we'd hit, it had intelligence. Files. Hard drives. Communication. Logs. If I left it, the enemy would know exactly what we'd been after and who we were. So I went back. Alone. Rigged the whole place to blow. Destroyed everything, then disappeared into the mountains." He leaned against the wall, suddenly looking older, more tired. "Took me 3 weeks to get out of country. By the time I made contact, I'd been declared KIA, and command made it clear that was how it needed to stay. They said if I came back, they'd court-martial me for disobeying orders, charge me with compromising the mission, make an example." "So you took the deal," Amber said. "I took the deal. They gave me a new identity, a clean background, and a monthly stipend. In exchange, I disappeared. No contact with former teammates, no acknowledgement of service, no questions asked." Amber felt tears burning behind her eyes. "Jackson survived the extraction. He made it to a field hospital. They stabilized him." Levi's eyes closed. "I know. I kept tabs. From a distance. Made sure he was okay. He died 3 days later." Amber continued, her voice breaking. "Infection. The shrapnel had carried bacteria into his chest cavity. Even with antibiotics, it spread too fast." Levi's hands clenched into fists. "I'm sorry. I thought getting him out would be enough." "It was," Amber said firmly. "Levi, you gave him a chance. Without you, he would have died in that compound. Because of you, He got 3 more days. 3 days where our family could say goodbye. Where he could tell us he loved us one last time. That matters. Levi looked at her, and for the first time, she saw the weight he'd been carrying. The guilt, the loss, the sacrifice. He talked about you, Amber said. Not by name, because he couldn't. But he told us about a teammate who wouldn't leave anyone behind. Who carried him through hell because it was the right thing to do. He called him a ghost who chose to haunt the living, to keep them safe. A tear slipped down Levi's cheek. He wiped it away quickly, but not before Amber saw it. Why maintenance work? She asked gently. You could have done anything. Gone anywhere. Because I have a daughter. Levi said, his voice steadying. Sophie. She's 8 years old. Her mother died when she was 2. Cancer. I'm all she has. He looked out the window again. I needed a job that was stable, quiet, somewhere she could grow up safe. And when I saw the opening here, at this facility, I thought maybe I could still serve. Not in the way I used to, but by making sure this place runs smoothly. By watching over these young warriors, even if they don't know it. Amber stepped closer. You've been protecting them. I've been trying. Levi said. Some of these kids, they're talented, strong, fearless, but they're also reckless. They think war is glory. I know better, so I watch. And when I see someone heading down a dangerous path, I try to steer them, quietly. That's why the older instructors respect you, Amber said. They've figured it out. Levi shrugged. Maybe. Or maybe they just appreciate that the equipment works and the floors are clean. Amber smiled slightly. I don't think that's it. They stood in silence for a moment, the truth finally laid bare between them. What happens now? Levi asked. Amber met his eyes. That depends. What do you want? I want to keep living quietly, he said. Keep raising my daughter. Keep doing this work. Then that's what will happen, Amber said. Your secret stays with me. But Levi, you should know something. What? You're not invisible anymore, she said softly. At least not to me. The next morning started like any other. Recruits filed into the gym at 0600 hours, still shaking off sleep. Adrenaline beginning to replace coffee as their primary fuel. The air was cold, the lights harsh, and the instructors were already positioned, ready to push bodies and minds to their breaking points. Levi Armstrong arrived at his usual time, pushing his maintenance cart through the side entrance. He moved through his morning routine with the same quiet efficiency as always, checking equipment, replacing worn parts, making sure everything was in working order. But something had shifted. Word had begun to spread. It started with whispers. Fragments of conversation caught between sets, passed along during water breaks. Someone had seen the tattoo. Someone else had heard a rumor. An older instructor had made an offhand comment that the maintenance guy wasn't who he seemed. And Cole Palmer, always eager to establish dominance, had been listening. Levi was tightening the bolts on a bench press when Cole approached, flanked by 3 other recruits. They positioned themselves in a loose semicircle, blocking his exit path. Not overtly threatening, but intentional. Hey, Armstrong, Cole said, loud enough to draw attention. Got a question for you. Levi continued working. What's that? Someone said you used to be military. That true? Levi paused, then resumed tightening the bolt. Long time ago. What branch? Navy. Cole smirked. Navy. Huh? So you were, what? A cook? A desk pusher? Because I'm trying to figure out how someone with actual combat experience ends up pushing a mop for a living. A few nearby recruits stopped their workouts, sensing tension. Levi set down his wrench and stood slowly. He was several inches shorter than Cole, older, and without the obvious muscle mass that came from daily training. But there was something in the way he held himself, a stillness that made the space around him feel heavier. I did my time, Levi said calmly. Then I moved on. Moved on to what? Cole pressed. Minimum wage and sweeping floors? Man, that's depressing. What happened? You wash out. No, Levi said. I got out before I turned into someone who measured his worth by how loud he could talk. The gym went quiet. A few recruits suppressed smiles. Cole's face flushed. You got something to say to me, old man? Just an observation, Levi said. You're strong, fast, probably score high on every physical test, but you lead with ego instead of discipline. That'll get you killed. Or worse, it'll get the men beside you killed. Cole stepped closer, jaw tight. You don't know anything about me. I know enough, Levi said. I know you're the type who thinks respect is taken, not earned. I know you see everyone around you as competition instead of teammates. And I know that in a real firefight, you'd be the first one to panic because you've never learned to control yourself. The words landed like punches. Cole's hands clenched into fists. You want to test that theory? Cole asked, voice low and dangerous. Levi didn't move. I don't need to test it. I've seen it 100 times. Men like you burn bright and fast, then they're gone. The ones who last are the ones who know when to stay quiet and when to move. Cole's breathing had quickened, adrenaline surging. Put your hands up. I'm not fighting you, Levi said. Why? Because you're scared. Because I have nothing to prove. Levi replied. Not to you, not to anyone. Cole lunged forward, grabbing Levi's shirt at the collar. Maybe I'll make you prove it. And that's when Amber Maxwell's voice cut through the tension like a blade. Recruit Palmer. Step back. Now. Cole froze. He turned to see Commander Maxwell striding across the gym floor, her expression cold and controlled. I said step back. Cole released Levi's shirt and took 2 steps backward, hands raised in mock surrender. Just having a conversation, ma'am. That didn't look like a conversation, Amber said. She stopped a few feet away, her gaze sweeping over the scene. It looked like harassment, and in this facility, harassment of any personnel, military or civilian, is grounds for disciplinary action. With respect, Commander, Cole said, his voice dripping with false politeness. This man was insulting my abilities. I was defending myself. By physically intimidating someone half your size who was doing his job, Amber asked. That's your definition of defense? Cole's jaw worked, but he said nothing. Amber turned to Levi. Are you all right, Mr. Armstrong? Levi nodded. Yes, ma'am. No harm done. She studied him for a moment, then looked back at Cole. You and I are going to have a conversation in my office. Right now, the rest of you, back to your training. The gym slowly returned to motion, though dozens of eyes remained on the scene. As Cole followed Amber toward the exit, he shot one last look back at Levi. It wasn't anger anymore. It was something worse. Wounded pride mixed with a promise that this wasn't over. Later that afternoon, Levi was restocking supplies in the equipment room when Amber found him. You handled that well, she said from the doorway. Levi looked up from the inventory checklist. I've handled worse. I know, Amber said. But you shouldn't have to. Not here. It's fine, Levi said. Kids like Cole, they're testing boundaries. It's part of the process. Maybe, Amber said. But I'm not going to let them use you as a target. Levi set down the clipboard. Commander, I appreciate what you did today. But I don't need protection. I can take care of myself. I know you can, Amber said. But you shouldn't have to prove it every day just to do your job in peace. She stepped into the room, lowering her voice. Cole's been put on notice. One more incident, and he's gone from the program. But I need to know something. Are you okay with staying? Because if this is going to keep happening, if your presence here is going to create ongoing problems, we can find another solution. Levi was quiet for a moment, considering. Then he shook his head. I'm not leaving. This job matters to me. And maybe, in some small way, me being here matters to these recruits, even if they don't realize it yet. Amber nodded. All right, then we do it your way. But if things escalate, If anyone crosses a line, you tell me. Deal? Deal, Levi said. As Amber turned to leave, Levi called after her, "Commander, thank you for standing up for me." She paused at the doorway and looked back. That's what leaders do, Levi. They protect the people who matter. And, whether you want to admit it or not, you matter here. Then she was gone, leaving Levi alone with his thoughts and the quiet certainty that his invisible days were truly over. The incident with Cole Palmer should have been the end of it. A warning issued, boundaries set, order restored. But in a facility filled with young warriors who thrived on competition and gossip, nothing stayed buried for long. Over the next week, the whispers grew louder. Recruits began paying closer attention to Levi Armstrong. They watched the way he moved, the precision in his work, the calm that never broke regardless of circumstance. Some started asking questions to the older instructors, probing for information about the quiet maintenance worker who seemed too composed, too aware. And then someone found the photograph. It happened during a routine cleaning of the facility's archive room. A dusty space filled with old training records, unit photos, and memorabilia from decades of operations. One of the recruits, a young operator named Hunter Tate, had been assigned to organize and digitize some of the older materials. He was scanning through boxes of photographs when he found it. A faded image from 2012, taken during a joint training exercise. In the background, barely visible, was a group of operators in unmarked gear. No insignia, no unit identification, just faces and weapons. But one of those faces looked familiar. Hunter enlarged the image on his computer, adjusting the contrast and brightness. The figure in the back, partially shadowed, had the same build and profile as Levi Armstrong. And on his forearm, just barely visible, was the edge of a tattoo. Hunter sat back in his chair, heart pounding. He made a copy of the image and, against his better judgment, shared it with a few of his teammates. By the next morning, it had spread through the entire recruit class. Levi noticed the change immediately. The way conversation stopped when he entered a room. The way eyes followed him with a new intensity. Not mockery anymore, but curiosity mixed with something that looked like respect, or maybe fear. He kept his head down and continued his work, but he knew it was only a matter of time before someone confronted him directly. That moment came during the afternoon training session. The gym was packed, every station occupied. Recruits were rotating through circuit training, pushing themselves through burpees, kettlebell swings, and rope climbs. The energy was high, competitive, each man trying to outperform the others. Levi was near the back wall, replacing a worn cable on the lat pull-down machine. He was focused on his work, hands steady, mind calculating tension ratios and load capacity. Then Cole Palmer's voice rang out, clear and challenging. "Hey, Armstrong." Question. Levi didn't look up. "I'm working, Palmer. This'll just take a second," Cole said, moving closer. Several other recruits began gravitating toward them, sensing confrontation. Someone found an old photo. Group of operators from 2012. Unmarked gear. No unit identification. Black Ops type stuff. Levi's hands didn't stop moving. Lot of photos like that around here. "Yeah," Cole said. "But this one's interesting. Because there's a guy in the background who looks exactly like you. Same build, same face, same tattoo." The gym was getting quieter now. More recruits were stopping their workouts, attention drawn to the exchange. "So, here's what I'm wondering," Cole continued. "Were you really just Navy, like you said? Or were you something else? Something you've been hiding?" Levi set down his tools and turned to face Cole. His expression was calm, but there was a weight in his eyes that made several of the closer recruits take an involuntary step back. "I told you I served," Levi said quietly. "What I didn't tell you is that it's none of your business what I did or didn't do. I think it is my business." Cole shot back. "Because if you were some kind of elite operator, and now you're here mopping floors, That means either you screwed up bad or you're lying about who you are. Either way, we deserve to know. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut. Every eye was on Levi Armstrong, waiting to see how he would respond. And that's when Amber Maxwell stepped into the center of the gym. "That's enough," she said, her voice carrying authority that silenced the remaining murmurs. She walked straight toward Cole and Levi, her posture rigid, her expression unreadable. "Commander, with respect," Cole began, "we have a right to know. You have a right to train." Amber cut him off. "You have a right to earn your place in this program. But you don't have a right to interrogate civilian personnel about their past." She turned to address the entire gym. "All of you, listen carefully. Mr. Armstrong's employment here is legitimate. His background has been vetted. What he chooses to share about his service is his decision, not yours to demand." "But Commander," Hunter Tate spoke up, holding his phone with the photograph on screen. "This photo, it's from a classified operation. If he was part of it, then he earned the right to privacy," Amber said firmly. She walked over and looked at the phone screen, then back at the assembled recruits. "How many of you know exactly what your instructors did during their service? The missions they ran, the operations they were part of?" Silence. "You don't know," Amber continued, "because the nature of special operations is that much of it remains classified for years, sometimes decades. Men and women serve in ways they can never talk about, make sacrifices they can never acknowledge, and carry burdens they can never share." She moved to stand beside Levi. "Mr. Armstrong is one of those men, and instead of demanding his story, you should be thanking him for his service and showing him the respect he's earned." Cole wasn't backing down. "So you're confirming he was special operations?" Amber's eyes hardened. "I'm confirming that he's a veteran who deserves dignity and privacy, just like every other person who's worn the uniform." She let that sink in, then continued, "But since you're all so curious, let me tell you something. The man you've been dismissing as just a maintenance worker served in one of the most classified units in naval special operations. He conducted missions in environments where failure meant death, where success meant silence, and where coming home meant carrying ghosts no one else could see." The gym was absolutely silent now. "He was part of Phantom Protocol," Amber said, and several of the older instructors in the room straightened, recognition flashing across their faces. "A unit so classified that most of you will never see a single declassified file about it. His call sign was Wraith, and the reason he's here, working quietly, living humbly, is because he chose a different kind of service after his official service ended." She turned to look at Levi, and there was something in her expression that went beyond professional respect. It was personal, deep, earned through shared understanding. "This man saved my brother's life," Amber said, her voice quieter now but no less powerful. "Carried him 12 miles through hostile territory to an extraction point, then went back into enemy fire to complete the mission. He was declared KIA because he stayed behind to protect his team, and when he finally made it out, he chose to disappear rather than accept recognition." She faced the recruits again. "So, before any of you judge him for pushing a mop or fixing your equipment, ask yourselves this: what have you done that's worthy of judging a man like that?" No one spoke. No one moved. Cole Palmer, for the first time since Levi had met him, looked genuinely humbled. He stared at Levi with new eyes, seeing not a janitor but a warrior who had chosen peace. Amber's voice cut through the silence one final time. "Now get back to training and show Mr. Armstrong the respect he's earned." The gym slowly came back to life, but everything had changed. The looks directed at Levi weren't curiosity or mockery anymore. They were awe, respect, and for some, something close to reverence. Levi stood quietly, feeling exposed in a way he hadn't in years. But when he met Amber's eyes, he saw understanding. She'd given him something he didn't ask for, but perhaps needed. Validation. Acknowledgement. A return from the shadows. He nodded once. A silent thank you. She nodded back, then turned and walked toward her office, leaving Levi standing in a gym that would never see him the same way again. The response came faster than either Levi or Amber expected. 72 hours after the public revelation, in the gym, a classified message arrived through secure channels. Amber was summoned to a video conference with Joint Special Operations Command. No explanation provided. Attendance mandatory. She sat alone in the facility's secure communications room, the walls lined with signal-blocking material. A single monitor displaying the seal of JSOC. Her stomach was tight with anticipation. She knew what this was about. The screen flickered to life. 3 figures appeared, each in separate video windows. Admiral Von Steele, current commander of Naval Special Warfare, Colonel Patricia Gaines, legal counsel for Special Operations, and a third person whose face was partially obscured, identified only as Dodd Oversight. Commander Maxwell. Admiral Steele began, his voice carrying the weight of 4 decades of service. "Thank you for joining us on short notice." "Sir," Amber replied, keeping her posture rigid. "We need to discuss a situation that's come to our attention." Steele continued. "Specifically, your public confirmation of classified information regarding a former operator and a unit that officially doesn't exist." Amber had prepared for this. "Sir, I revealed only what was necessary to maintain order and morale within my command. The situation was escalating, and you exposed a protected identity." Colonel Gaines interrupted, her tone sharp and precise. "Mr. Armstrong was given a full, operational shield following his separation from service. That shield included anonymity, background reconstruction, and legal protection from disclosure. By confirming his past, you've potentially violated federal statutes regarding classified operations." "With respect, Colonel," Amber said, "Mr. Armstrong's identity was already compromised. A photograph had been circulated among the recruits. Questions were being asked. I made a command decision to control the narrative before it spiraled into something that could have caused greater security concerns." The third figure, DoD Oversight, spoke for the first time. The voice was digitally altered, gender indistinguishable. "Commander, the issue isn't whether you had reasons. The issue is precedent. If we allow one commander to declassify protected personnel at will, the entire system of operational security collapses." "I didn't declassify him," Amber countered. "I acknowledged his service in the broadest possible terms. I revealed no mission details, no operational specifics, no compromising intelligence. I simply confirmed that he was a veteran worthy of respect." Admiral Steele leaned forward slightly. "Commander, I need you to understand the position you've put us in. Phantom Protocol was dissolved specifically because it became a political liability. The operations that unit conducted, if they ever became public, would generate congressional hearings, international incidents, and potentially criminal prosecutions. I understand that, sir. Do you?" Colonel Gaines asked. "Because right now, there are over 60 recruits at your facility who know that a Phantom Protocol operator is working among them. That information will spread. It always does. And when it does, we'll have reporters asking questions, politicians demanding answers, and enemies of this nation targeting anyone associated with that unit." Amber felt her resolve hardening. "Then perhaps the system is broken, Colonel. Perhaps the problem isn't that I confirmed Mr. Armstrong's service, but that we built a structure where heroes have to hide in shame while politicians take credit for their sacrifices." The room fell silent. She'd crossed a line, spoken a truth that everyone knew, but no one acknowledged. Admiral Steele's expression remained neutral, but something flickered in his eyes. Respect. Maybe. Or recognition of a younger version of himself. "Commander Maxwell," he said carefully, "your conviction is admirable. But conviction without discipline is just rebellion. And rebellion, however righteous, has consequences." "What consequences, sir?" Amber asked. Colonel Gaines answered, "We're considering several options. Reassignment of Mr. Armstrong to a facility outside the continental United States. Mandated psychological evaluation to determine if his presence in an active training environment poses security risks. Or, if necessary, revocation of his operational shield and formal investigation into any disclosure violations. Amber's blood ran cold. You'd destroy his life over this? We'd protect national security, Gaines replied. His life, while regrettable, is secondary to that mission. That's not acceptable, Amber said, her voice rising despite her attempts to control it. Mr. Armstrong gave everything for this country. He saved lives, completed impossible missions, and then disappeared, without asking for anything in return. And now you want to punish him because I tried to give him basic dignity. What we want, the Dodd oversight voice said, is containment. The situation at Blackwater must be controlled. The recruits must be debriefed and reminded of security protocols, and Mr. Armstrong must be relocated or removed. Amber took a breath, steadying herself. I have an alternative proposal. Admiral Steele raised an eyebrow. We're listening. Leave Mr. Armstrong where he is, Amber said. But change his role. Make him an official consultant for operational psychology and team dynamics. Give him a title that explains his presence without revealing classified details. Let him mentor these recruits in resilience, decision-making under pressure, and the long-term costs of this career. She leaned forward, passion driving her words. These young operators are being trained to fight, to kill, to win. But no one's teaching them how to come home afterward. How to live with what they've done. How to find purpose when the mission ends. Mr. Armstrong can teach them that. Not because it's in a manual, but because he's lived it. Colonel Gaines frowned. That would require formal acknowledgement of his past service. It would require acknowledgement that he's a veteran with relevant experience. Amber corrected. Nothing more specific than that. We control the narrative, we maintain security, and we turn a potential liability into an asset. Admiral Steele sat back, considering. The silence stretched for nearly 30 seconds. Finally, he spoke. Colonel Gaines, what's your legal assessment? Gaines was quiet for a moment. If we structure it correctly, with proper documentation and limited disclosure, it could work. We'd need Mr. Armstrong's cooperation, full security briefings for the recruits, and ongoing monitoring. But it's not without precedent. Information. The DoD oversight voice added. It would require approval from several oversight committees. Then get that approval, Admiral Steele said with finality. Commander Maxwell, you have 48 hours to brief Mr. Armstrong and obtain his consent. If he agrees, we'll move forward with your proposal. If he refuses, he'll be relocated and his shield will be reinforced through other means. Clear? Crystal clear, sir, Amber said. One more thing, Steele added, his tone softening slightly. Your father would be proud of you. You fought for your people. That's what good commanders do. Just make sure you're also thinking 3 moves ahead, because the people watching this situation, they're thinking 5 moves ahead. Understood? Yes, sir. The screen went dark. Amber sat alone in the silent room, her heart pounding. She'd bought Levi time, maybe even a future, but she'd also put both of their careers on the line. She stood, straightened her uniform, and headed for the door. She had 48 hours to convince a ghost to step into the light, and she had no idea if he'd agree. Amber found Levi in the maintenance shed, the same place they'd had their first real conversation. He was organizing tools on a pegboard, each item placed with careful precision. The late afternoon sun filtered through the dusty window, casting long shadows across the concrete floor. We need to talk, Amber said from the doorway. Levi set down the wrench he was holding. I figured. Word travels fast in command circles. You heard? I didn't need to hear specifics, Levi said. You defended me publicly. That always has consequences. Amber stepped inside and closed the door. JSOC contacted me. They're not happy about the disclosure. I could have told you that, Levi said without judgment. What do they want? Initially, they wanted you relocated or investigated, possibly both. Levi nodded slowly, absorbing this. And now I've bought us an option, Amber said. But it requires your agreement, and I need to be honest with you. It's going to change your life here. She explained the proposal. The consultant role, the formal mentorship position, the structure that would allow him to work openly with recruits while maintaining operational security. Levi listened, without interrupting, his expression unreadable. When she finished, silence filled the shed. Levi walked to the window and looked out at the training grounds where young warriors were running obstacle courses, their shouts and grunts carrying on the wind. You're asking me to step out of the shadows, he said finally. I'm offering you a chance to serve differently, Amber replied. These recruits, they're being forged into weapons. But no one's teaching them how to be human afterward. You can do that. What if I say no? Levi asked. Then they relocate you, probably overseas, somewhere far from Sophie. You'd still have your stipend, still have your anonymity, but you'd lose this. The stability, this proximity to your daughter, this community. Levi's jaw tightened at the mention of his daughter. Sophie was everything to him. The reason he'd survived, the reason he'd chosen peace over violence, the reason he got up every morning. How much would I have to reveal? He asked. Nothing specific, Amber said. No mission details, no operational intelligence, just your experience. What you learned, what you carried, how you found your way back. Levi was quiet for a long time. When he spoke again, his voice was heavy with emotion. I spent 15 years being a ghost, existing in spaces between official records. And then I spent another 11 years trying to disappear completely. Being nobody. Just a maintenance worker, just a dad, just someone who fixes things quietly. He turned to face her. You're asking me to be seen again. To stand in front of people and admit that I was someone else once. Someone dangerous. I'm asking you to be whole, Amber said gently. You're not that operator anymore. But you're not just a maintenance worker either. You're both. And these young warriors need to see both. They need to know that strength isn't just about what you can do in combat. It's about what you become afterward. Levi looked at her. Really looked at her. And saw not just a commander but someone who understood. Someone who'd lost her own brother to this life and was trying to prevent more losses. Sophie comes first, he said. Whatever I decide, she stays protected. No media, no attention, no risk to her safety. Agreed, Amber said. That's non-negotiable. And I won't glorify what I did. Levi added. I won't tell war stories, like their adventures. These kids need to understand the cost, not just the glory. That's exactly what they need, Amber said. Levi took a deep breath, and Amber watched as decades of weight shifted on his shoulders, not disappearing, but redistributing, finding new balance. All right, he said finally, I'll do it, but on one condition. Name it. You let me do this my way, Levi said. No scripts, no official curriculum. I teach them what they need to learn when they're ready to learn it. Some lessons can't be scheduled. Amber extended her hand. Deal. They shook, and in that moment, something fundamental changed. Not just for Levi, but for the entire facility. 3 days later, Commander Amber Maxwell stood before the assembled recruit class in the main briefing room. Every seat was filled, the energy crackling with curiosity and anticipation. Word had spread that something significant was happening. Gentlemen, Amber began, her voice carrying authority and warmth in equal measure. This facility has always prided itself on producing the finest warriors in the world. We push your bodies, sharpen your minds, and forge you into operators capable of handling the impossible. She paused, letting the words settle. But we've been missing something. We've been so focused on making you deadly that we forgot to teach you how to live. how to carry what you'll see and do, how to come home when the fighting stops. She gestured to the side door, which is why I'm introducing a new component to your training. Starting next week, you'll participate in resilience workshops led by someone who has actual experience with the long-term costs of this career. The door opened, and Levi Armstrong walked in, not in his maintenance uniform, but in simple civilian clothes, a dark polo shirt, and khaki pants. He looked the same, yet somehow different, more present, more solid, like he was occupying space instead of moving through it. Some of the recruits straightened. Others exchanged glances. Cole Palmer, sitting in the third row, looked down at his hands. "This is Levi Armstrong," Amber continued, "formerly of Naval Special Operations, specifically a classified unit I've already acknowledged. He's not here to train you in tactics or weapons. You have instructors for that. He's here to prepare you for something harder, surviving what comes after." She looked at Levi, giving him the floor. Levi stepped forward, his eyes scanning the room. When he spoke, his voice was calm but carried weight. "I'm not going to tell you war stories," he said. "I'm not going to describe operations or missions. What I'm going to teach you is something no manual covers. How to make decisions when every option is terrible. How to lead when you're more scared than the people following you. How to carry loss without letting it destroy you." He paused. "And most importantly, how to remember that the goal isn't just to survive combat. It's to survive what comes after combat. To be able to look in the mirror 10 years from now and recognize the person staring back." The room was silent, every eye locked on him. "I'll be here twice a week," Levi continued. "Sessions are voluntary but recommended. Come if you want to learn. Stay away if you think you already have all the answers. But understand this. The strongest warriors aren't the ones who never break. They're the ones who break and then rebuild themselves into something better." He stepped back, and Amber concluded the briefing. As the recruits filed out, several approached Levi directly. Not to challenge him, but to thank him. To ask questions. To seek guidance. And for the first time in over a decade, Levi Armstrong felt like he was truly serving again. 6 months passed like water, finding new channels, reshaping everything it touched. The resilience workshops became the most attended voluntary sessions at Blackwater Naval Complex. Twice a week, recruits filled the briefing room to hear Levi Armstrong speak about things their tactical manuals never covered. He taught them about moral injury, about the weight of taking a life, about the difference between courage and recklessness. He taught them how to recognize trauma in themselves and their teammates, how to ask for help without shame, how to build lives that could withstand the pressure of what they would see and do. But more than the lessons, it was his presence that changed them. The way he listened without judgment, the way he shared his own struggles without self-pity, the way he made it clear that strength wasn't about never falling apart. It was about having the courage to put yourself back together. Cole Palmer was among his most dedicated students. The cocky recruit who'd once mocked Levi now sat in the front row of every session, taking notes, asking thoughtful questions. He'd approached Levi privately 3 weeks after the workshops began, voice thick with something that might have been regret. "I was wrong about you," Cole had said, "and I'm sorry." Levi had simply nodded. "You weren't wrong. You just didn't have all the information. Now you do. What matters is what you do with it." That conversation had marked a turning point for Cole. He still trained hard, still competed fiercely. But there was a new quality to his leadership. Less ego, more awareness. Less volume, more substance. The change rippled through the entire recruit class. Training scores improved. Team cohesion strengthened. Even the instructors noticed the difference. The way these young warriors were learning to balance aggression with compassion, intensity with wisdom. And through it all, Levi Armstrong found something he'd thought was lost forever. Purpose without violence. Service without sacrifice of self. On a cool evening in late October, Amber stood on the observation deck overlooking the training grounds. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Below, recruits were finishing evening PT, their cadence calls carrying on the wind. She heard footsteps behind her and turned to find Levi approaching. He'd changed from his teaching clothes into jeans and a worn jacket, ready to head home to Sophie. "Commander," he said with a slight smile. Over the months, their professional relationship had deepened into something that felt like friendship, though neither had named it. "Levi," she replied. "Good session today." "Better than good," he said, joining her at the railing. Hunter Tate opened up about some trauma from his father's deployment. First time he's talked about it with anyone. The other recruits listened, shared their own experiences. It was real. Amber smiled. "You're doing important work." "We're doing important work," Levi corrected. "This wouldn't have happened without you. You risked your career to give me this chance." "I'd do it again," Amber said simply. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the sun descend. Then Amber reached into her jacket and pulled out an envelope. It was weathered, the edges soft with age. "I found something," she said, handing it to him. "Going through more of Jackson's effects. My father sent me a box last month. Things he'd kept that he thought I should have." Levi took the envelope carefully. His name was written on the front in handwriting he recognized immediately. "Jackson Maxwell's." "He wrote this?" Levi asked, his voice rough. 3 days before he died," Amber said. "He must have known the infection was spreading. He gave it to the field hospital chaplain with instructions to deliver it if anyone ever found you." Levi's hands trembled slightly as he opened the envelope and unfolded the single page inside. "Wraith, if you're reading this, someone found you. I hope that means you made it out, found peace, built something worth living for. You deserve that more than any of us. I don't remember much from that extraction. Pain, dust, your voice telling me to stay awake. But I remember the moment I understood you weren't leaving. Command had given the order to scatter, and you looked at me and said, 'Not without you.' Those 3 words saved my life. I know how this world works. I know they'll bury you in paperwork and secrecy, call you a ghost and pretend you never existed. But I need you to know something. You existed to me. You exist to everyone you saved. We carry you with us, whether the official records acknowledge it or not. If my sister finds you, and I think she will because she's stubborn like that, please tell her I wasn't afraid at the end. Tell her I got to come home because of you. And tell her that the best warriors aren't the ones who fight the hardest. They're the ones who know what they're fighting for. You taught me that. Thank you for carrying me. Thank you for staying. And thank you for whatever life you built after. You earned every moment of peace. Semper Fi." Jackson Levi finished reading and had to turn away, pressing the heels of his hands against his eyes. Amber gave him space, her own tears falling silently. When he finally turned back, his voice was thick. "I thought I was too late. I thought saving him just meant he died somewhere else." "You gave him 3 more days," Amber said. 3 days where he could write letters, say goodbye, tell our family he loved us. 3 days where he wasn't alone in that compound. That's not too late, Levi. That's everything. He folded the letter carefully and held it to his chest. "I don't know how to thank you for this." "You already have," Amber said. "Every recruit you help, every lesson you teach, every time you show these warriors that coming home is possible, you're honoring Jackson. You're making sure his sacrifice meant something." Levi looked at her, and something passed between them. Recognition, understanding, connection. 2 people who'd lost pieces of themselves to war and were learning to be whole again. "Sophie's been asking about you," Levi said after a moment. "Wants to know if you'd come to dinner sometime. She's making her famous spaghetti, which is mostly sauce and enthusiasm." Amber smiled, wiping her eyes. "I'd like that." "Saturday," Levi offered. "Saturday," Amber confirmed. As they walked together toward the parking lot, Levi felt lighter than he had in years. Not because the weight was gone, but because he'd learned to carry it differently. With help, with purpose, with hope. His truck was parked near the facility entrance. Before getting in, he turned back one last time to look at the compound. The gym where he'd once mopped floors in silence. The briefing room where he now taught warriors how to stay human. The grounds where young operators trained for battles they couldn't imagine. This place had given him back his life. Not the one he'd lost, but a new one. Better in ways he was still discovering. He climbed into his truck and drove toward home, toward Sophie, toward a future that finally felt possible. And behind him, Commander Amber Maxwell stood watching until his taillights disappeared. A smile on her face and her brother's letter pressed against her heart. The ghosts had finally found peace, not by disappearing, but by learning to walk in the light. Together. 2 years later, the ceremony was held outdoors on a clear spring morning. Rows of white chairs faced a temporary stage erected on the training grounds at Blackwater Naval Complex. The air carried the scent of fresh-cut grass and salt from the nearby ocean. Families filled the seats, some in their finest clothes, others in military dress uniforms passed down through generations. Levi Armstrong stood backstage, adjusting the collar of his button-down shirt. He wasn't used to formal events, preferred the background to the spotlight, but today was different. Today mattered. "You ready?" Amber asked, appearing beside him. She wore her dress uniform, ribbons and insignia gleaming in the sunlight. Over the past 2 years, she'd been promoted to executive officer of the entire Naval Special Warfare Training Command. Her leadership had become legendary, her approach to warrior development studied and replicated across multiple facilities. "As ready as I'll ever be," Levi said, managing a slight smile. "Sophie here?" Amber asked. "Front row, center. Wouldn't miss it." Amber squeezed his hand briefly, a gesture that had become natural between them. Their relationship had evolved slowly, carefully, built on mutual respect and shared understanding. They hadn't rushed anything, both carrying too much history to take connection lightly, but what had grown between them was solid, real, something that felt like home. The ceremony began with the national anthem. Then Admiral Von Steele took the stage, the same officer who'd initially questioned Amber's decision to reveal Levi's past. Time and results had changed his perspective entirely. 2 years ago, Steele began, his voice carrying across the assembled crowd. This facility introduced an experimental program. Resilience training led by a former operator who understood the true cost of service. Some in command thought it was unnecessary. Others thought it would make our warriors soft. He paused, scanning the audience. They were all wrong. Steele detailed the statistics. Decreased attrition rates. Improved team cohesion scores. Reduced post-deployment mental health incidents among graduates. Most importantly, feedback from the field showed that operators trained through the new program were making better decisions under pressure, supporting their teammates more effectively, and adapting to civilian life with greater success. The results speak for themselves. Steele continued, which is why I'm pleased to announce that the resilience program pioneered here at Blackwater will now be implemented across all Naval Special Warfare Training facilities. And we're establishing the Jackson Maxwell Fellowship for Warrior Resilience, named after a fallen hero whose sacrifice inspired this transformation. Amber felt tears prick her eyes. Her brother's name, spoken aloud, honored publicly. It was more than she'd ever hoped for. Steele gestured toward backstage. "Mr. Levi Armstrong, please join me." Levi walked onto the stage, blinking in the bright sunlight. The audience applauded, but it was the sight of Sophie in the front row, beaming with pride, that steadied him. Beside her sat Amber's father, retired Admiral Theodore Maxwell, who offered Levi a respectful nod. Steele shook Levi's hand, then presented him with a framed certificate, in recognition of exceptional service to Naval Special Warfare, for pioneering methods in warrior resilience and psychological readiness, and for demonstrating that true strength includes the courage to be vulnerable. We present you with the Admiral Stockdale Leadership Award. The applause grew louder. Levi accepted the certificate, throat tight with emotion. Not because of the award itself, but because of what it represented. Acknowledgement, validation, a statement that the work he was doing mattered. When the applause died down, Levi stepped to the microphone. He'd prepared no speech, decided instead to speak from the heart. "I'm not comfortable with recognition," he began. "Spent most of my career in shadows, and even more years trying to disappear completely. But I've learned something important. Hiding isn't the same as healing." He looked out at the audience, seeing recruits he'd mentored, instructors who'd supported the program, families who'd sent their sons and daughters into this life. "The warriors we train here are capable of incredible things. They'll go places most people can't imagine and do things that will never make headlines. But when they come home, they need more than discipline and toughness. They need permission to be human, permission to struggle, to heal, to ask for help." His voice strengthened. "This fellowship, this program, it's not mine. It belongs to every operator who carried invisible wounds. To my friend Jackson Maxwell, who taught me that coming home is just as important as completing the mission. And to Commander Amber Maxwell, who had the courage to believe that warriors could be both strong and whole." He glanced at Amber, standing just off stage, and saw pride shining in her eyes. "So to the families here today," Levi continued, "know that we're not just training your loved ones to fight, we're teaching them to survive, to thrive, to come home to you as complete people, not just as weapons. That's the promise we're making. And it's a promise I'll spend the rest of my life keeping." The applause that followed was thunderous. Recruits stood, then instructors, then the entire audience rose in a standing ovation that seemed to shake the very ground. Levi stepped back from the microphone and returned to Amber's side. She took his hand openly this time, in front of everyone. "Jackson would be proud," she whispered. "So would all of them." Levi replied, thinking of the faces he carried, the ones who didn't make it home, the ones whose sacrifice had led him here, to this moment, to this purpose. As the ceremony concluded, and families gathered for photographs, Sophie ran to her father and threw her arms around him. Levi lifted her easily, holding her close. "You were amazing, Dad," she said. "No, sweetheart," Levi replied, kissing her forehead. "We're amazing. All of us. Together. And surrounded by people who'd become family." Standing on ground that had witnessed both his lowest moments and his greatest transformations, Levi Armstrong finally understood what coming home really meant. Not a place, not a rank, not a mission accomplished, but the courage to be seen, to be known, and to keep serving, one quiet act of strength at a time. Up next, you've got two more standout stories, right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.